Welcome to the Next Level Podcast, powered by San Manuel, a series connecting you with the best minds in casino, hospitality, tribal government, and beyond. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everyone. I am super excited today to talk to my friend, but also one of the most successful CEOs in all of gaming, probably one of the youngest ones as well. And I'm proud to have you on here, Andrew Burke, CEO of Bluberi.
Thanks for having me, Kenji. Really happy to be here.
Well, Andrew, I want to make sure that, I can give a full intro about you, but I think it's easier when it comes from you. So if you can give us kind of a quick origin story, kind of how you found your way into this role and kind of how you grew up and what you're doing today.
Sure. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is a very blue-collar town, and it's close to the border of Kentucky. And I went to the University of Cincinnati, and after school, I got a job at a private equity firm in San Francisco called Alpine Investors. And I would actually say that was probably the luckiest break of my life, getting that job. And so I moved to San Francisco like 5 days after graduation in 2006 to take that job. And, I started there. It was kind of pre-2008. So like the market was still really hot. Like there was lots of deals going on. And I learned a ton in that time period. I did a ton of different things that I really had no sort of business doing at that point. But I learned a lot about businesses. I learned a lot about finance. And when I started there in 2006, they had just acquired a company called AGS at the time. From the founder of that company. And around 2008, when the sort of market blew up, we stopped kind of making new investments and really started focusing on the companies that we owned. And so I kind of went to work at AGS sort of full time at that point, and eventually transitioned to the management team in 2010 and moved to Las Vegas in 2011. I think probably a lot of people know AGS's story, so I won't really harp on that, but I stayed through the sort of growth of that company and eventually taking it, going part of the team that went and took it public. And then in January of 19, January 2020, late 19, I was recruited to come to Bluberi as the CEO. And January 2020 is the perfect time to be a first-time CEO, as I think everybody knows at this point. If I only knew what was coming. So I was here through COVID, and the business was kind of going through a bit of a turnaround at that time as well. We were able to get a great team and kind of turn this business around in a lot of amazing ways. And so it's been a pretty amazing journey. Outside of work, I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We went to high school together. We went to college together. We moved to San Francisco together. She worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers while we were in San Francisco, and she's a director of tax in Vegas today. And then we have two little girls that eat up every second of my free time. I have volleyball practice tonight at 6 p.m. after this. So
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. Let me get from the start of that origin, just peel back at the beginning of private equity, just for our listeners out there. What exactly, when you say I was in private equity, what does that mean? What was your role? How did that work?
I didn't actually know the answer to that when I took that job, so I think it's a good starting point. But private equity firms, and at that time, they weren't as big of a deal as they are now. But private equity firms are, they raise pools of capital from, generally individuals and institutions, and use that money to buy privately held businesses. And so when I went to work at Alpine, it was a small private equity firm managing about $250 million, and it owned about 16 different companies in a wide range of industries, like from sort of continuing education. They had a company that was big into real estate, continuing education, to direct marketing companies that would do like direct mailers, to a slot machine company. So they had just like a wide range of businesses. And for somebody with a ton of intellectual curiosity and an interest in finance, it's like a dream job, because you just get to look at new businesses all day and then decide, hey, are we going to invest in this business or not? And once a private equity firm invests in a business, they generally lend some sort of operational support to the company. So, you invest in it, but then you're working with the management team Sometimes it's the founder of the company. Sometimes it's an owner, the CEO or owner of the company, to help them sort of achieve their business objectives. And so as a young person coming out of college, it was literally the greatest job in the world, where I got to work alongside a lot of owners and some really great investors at Alpine to see how they kind of operated and built businesses. And so it was a really amazing seat for a young kid.
So let's take that next step down the road. You go to AGS. You haven't had a casino or a slot background of any type there. How do you invest yourself within that business? How do you start growing that group and working with them from a management perspective?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting time for me. So I became kind of passionate about the gaming business, just learning about AGS, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. It's exciting. It's not every business that you deal with is dealing with casinos or Las Vegas and all these fun things. So I started just reading everything I could find on the gaming business. I found, sort of reports that were being put out by investment banks. I found, I think back then it was Casino Enterprise Management. I was looking at all the publicly traded, transcripts from calls. And then I was trying to just meet as many people as I could to understand and learn the business. I really dove into that pretty hard. And when I moved to Las Vegas, AGS was on nobody's radar. Nobody knew who the company was. It was primarily focused in Oklahoma, doing business with tribes in Oklahoma, and mostly as actually a distributor. We didn't have our own game development, team at that time. We were partnered with other companies, and so it was just a really fascinating way to learn the business. But I feel I learned sort of the tribal side of the business first, and then eventually learned the commercial part of the business. But it was really an exciting challenge, and it lit up my brain to look at all the different parts of the business and different components of it.
And the trajectory of AGS from that point on is a great story. Let's talk about the Bluberi story. So you jumped into
Sure.
Bluberi as a different component there. What was the situation like when you jumped in? Obviously, pre-COVID, totally different situation, but
Yeah.
Class 2 type product was its strength. How were you able to? What was your thought process coming into that?
Yeah, I was really excited to come to Bluberi because I worked with him in the past at my previous job, and I knew the team a little bit from kind of afar, and I knew they had a rich history in Class 2 gaming. I knew that their artwork and their animation was top notch. I always thought that about Bluberi Games from way back in the first time I saw them, and I just thought that what a great opportunity. This little business has some amazing bones, has good technology, and has the ability to build games, but they just really were lacking at the time when I got here, financial discipline and sort of business discipline. And so I actually use the term hygiene a lot for cleaning up the business. We just needed hygiene in certain areas of the business, whether it's reporting or financials or understanding how much cash do we have and what bills are due. And so, spent a couple of years trying to get the right people here, focused on getting the right discipline in the business. And, on the backs of that, we've been able to have a lot of success, but it really was just about prioritizing what we needed to do, getting the right people here, and then focusing ourselves on executing the right things.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about how you build that group together to go down the same path, because it sounds again, many businesses that are in that stage are still kind of in 7 different directions and trying to get them focused down the right path. That's, I think, a key contributing factor to the success that you guys have had there.
I think a ton of small businesses, and maybe all businesses, can drown in opportunity. Everything seems like a great idea. You're oh, we can make a lot of money doing this, or we can make a lot of money doing that. But I think you really have to step back and say, what are the sustainable revenue streams available to me that we can participate in profitably that match up with our skill set? And then sort of laser focus yourself on that. And, that's sort of what we did, was anything we were doing that wasn't just how do we develop slot machines on a portrait screen, we stopped doing. And there was plenty of things they were trying to do and just ancillary sort of revenue opportunities, but that's not how you build a strategic business. You build a strategic business by focusing on, markets that you can compete in uniquely for, a long period of time.
Well, let's talk about your growth now. So now that you guys have really, what I would say, maybe you won't, but I believe it's easy to say you've turned the corner. You guys are now gone from an emerging supplier into one of the bigger dogs now. You're working your way into that space. What does that plan now look like? Obviously, before it was in smaller steps. Now some of those other opportunities that you're talking about where you can branch out are available to you. You have the capital to do it. You've had success rates. You've built the infrastructure. What does that plan look like for you guys?
We spend a lot of time here talking about 2 years from now, and we've done that the entire time that I've been here. It's like, if we're, the exercise we use always is centered around G2E. So it's like, okay, we're standing in the booth. It's G2E 2026. What does the booth look like? And what are the product lines that we have in it? And how do we kind of work our way back from 2026 to now to make sure that we're doing the right things to set ourselves up from that? And my executive team and I just had an offsite a few weeks ago doing that. And we've basically taken every sort of market that we're not in, every product vertical that we're not in, and we've ranked them. And we kind of create a system on how we think we should go from what we're doing now to the next thing. And then we do some research and try to market size those things for us. Like, hey, do we think going into this market is going to generate, enough money for us at that point to be worth it? And what's the chances that we take our eyes off sort of the main prize of the business, which is sort of North American slot growth? And so we're very, very thoughtful about what we do next. I would say if you think about areas that we're thinking about online, certainly. Like, that business is getting bigger and bigger in North America. And so we want to be thoughtful about what our online presence looks like 2 years from now. And then we're continuing to think about ways to sort of innovate in North America gaming, with our great content and building, just great portrait screen content at the business. But I think the trick in business, and a lot of times, especially in our industry, because the product development cycle is so long, that like everything we're doing today, everything we're executing on today is because of decisions we made 2 years ago. And so if you didn't make the right decision 2 years ago, like, you may be able to hustle a little harder or do something a little bit, different to nudge your performance, but you really had to have made the right decision. And so we're always just trying to think, like, are we making the right decisions today for 2 years from now?
Yeah, I love that. I'm fortunate to work for a tribe that thinks generationally, not necessarily on the year over year, and understanding what decisions we make today and how they affect the long term. I mean, we have a 7-year plan that we sit on there. And so I know what my next 7-year kind of roadmap is. But it's hard to always stay focused on the appropriate strategy. And I think you guys have done a really good job on strategy and focus. But one thing that I also think, you mentioned G2E, and I love talking about this because I think you guys have decided that, hey, we're going to do things differently than other folks do. We're going to do things different than other suppliers or vendors or partners that we have there. And while the booth still has the games in there, there's the story behind the game, which I always thought was just incredible when you can peel back and understand what's the volatility of the game, what's the design style of the game, what is the emotion that you're trying to grab out of people in the game. Where did that all come from? And has that proven to be successful in looking at it completely differently than all of the other competitors out there?
I think if I could describe Bluberi in 3 words, it would be quality, fun, and different. And like, if you use those 3 kind of words as like our guiding principles, at the company, we try to use that to think about everything. So if you think about G2E, it's like, well, how do we do this at a really high quality? What's going to be fun about it? And then how do we make it different? And, I think it's really easy to do something different one time and then just try to keep doing that. So we're always trying to even like outdo ourselves the next year, and then G3 just so happens to be this like great Super Bowl event for us where all of our customers can be at one place. And the way I view G2E is that it is a chance for us to tell customers what our brand is. And we can sell you products while we're there, that's fine. But if you don't walk away from our booth at G2E thinking, wow, they've really thought about the next 3 to 5 years, they're really thinking about executing at a high quality, and they're doing something different, then we didn't do our job. And so like, that's kind of like been an undertone that we've all, the executive team, we all love that. And we push that envelope and try to push ourselves on that. Like, how do we really just do something a little bit different? And it doesn't need to be radical, and it doesn't need to be like, oh my gosh, we're going to build a game that doesn't have spinning reels. Like, that's one way to be different, but for us, it's like, how do we be different around the edges? And sort of, we have this phrase around here that we call winning on the fringes. And it's like, so how do we just have those little tweaks and those little innovations that when you package them all together, it comes out and you go, wow, that was a really different experience. And I can tell you that the plans I've seen for G2E this year, like, our plan is to do something very different this year than we did last year, and that maybe anybody's ever done at the show. So I think it's going to be a really unique opportunity for us.
I can't wait. Yeah. I think there's something to be said about that too. It's easy to copy the successes of others. Look, we have a lot of great, your competitors, a lot of slot vendors out there are great at what they do. They put out a great product. The show is the show. It is what they have there. But what I want people to understand is that success always doesn't take the same path for everyone. And I think being true to who you are, I always refer to you guys as the new school. I think you do too as well. Is that being true to who you guys are and true to what your leadership team is kind of a separation. It's a differentiator that's there. And it proves that success isn't always linear path for everyone the same way down the same road. There are different ways of getting there.
I totally agree. I think that if you do I always have thought to myself, like, if you do what everybody else does, the best you can do is average. If you really want to outperform, you have to do something different. And then you got to decide what's the right different thing to do, because different can be devastating to a business too, if you do it the wrong way. So you have to just be thoughtful about what does it mean to be different and how are we going to be different. And not be just different for different sake, but be different because we think we can do this other thing sort of better than other people can do it.
And I think some of them are just subtle things too, as well. Look, we know that being successful, it's required to do these things right. Like, I've still got to make sure that our games look great. I got to make sure that they perform well. I want to make sure that they get the feel of what the games are. But there's the little nuances that you guys put, which I would say was that stuff on the fringe that nobody else does. And that's what makes it special.
A lot of times I think one of the ways we think about how do we come up with those ideas is like, you think about what things annoy you and you work to sort of remove those. Like, what things are we doing that our customers are just annoyed by, and how do we work backward from that and come up with some new way to do it, And so we do that exercise a lot around here where it's like, what do we think is annoying slot users? What do we think is annoying slot managers, right? And then even like, what's annoying our service technicians? That's a good one too. Like, and you start working your way back from that and you start coming up with these sort of innovative solutions to kind of undo those things that sort of cause friction with, sort of your user experience.
I think what's also important is that you actually listen to what your customers are saying. I know that I call him my slot guru here at our side with Alan Schultz, and he'll have a frank conversation and you guys are open to having that frank conversation about, hey, this is what I think works. This is what I don't think is not working there. Maybe you guys should make some of these adjustments, and you guys take it back and you take the approach of, wow, that's what they're seeing from an operator perspective. Maybe we need to relook at these things, and the games come out differently than we see them the first time. And that care, I think, is incredible for what you guys are doing.
We really value feedback. And I think taking feedback is a skill because not everybody appreciates it. And it's not always a thing that is easy to hear, but I think we've had our most success by getting feedback, hearing that feedback and adjusting to it. And I think that is the type of stuff for us that's always going to make us a resilient business in the long run. You talk about the tribe thinking generationally. I try to take that long view as well and think, well, if we want to be the company we want to be in 2029 or 2030, like, we're going to have to survive some ups and downs, and we're going to have to go through some trials and tribulations, and we're going to have to be resilient. But like, taking feedback will shorten those cycles.
Right.
And especially if you have experts on the other end, which we believe we do in game development and elsewhere, getting that feedback and filtering it and taking the right stuff out of it and then implementing it. And that's really for us, like, really what it's about in the long run is how do you get enough feedback from the market, to kind of validate your own assumptions and then sort of blend those things together to build better products.
I think that's part of the, we have a conversation. We talk about failing fast and learning faster and working through, you have to take some of these shots. And again, I think being successful means you're going to have to miss sometimes. You're never going to be 100%. And how do you create that environment within your organization that tells people, look, it's okay to fail as long as we're trying and we're doing the right backstory on this, that we think that it's going the right direction. But if it fails, that's fine. As long as we learn something out of it, that's the success.
I think everybody that's worked with me will know that I have a very high tolerance and patience for setbacks. And for me, it's all about what did we learn and what are we going to do differently next time? If we can honestly answer those two questions, I have a very high tolerance for us to sort of make errors, right? And I use the example of the game show Survivor a lot. I'm like, look, to win the show, you have to survive tribal council, right? You got to go to it. People are probably going to vote for you. And you got to make it to the other end, right? So you have to have this resilience when things are hard or tough and you got to push your way through it. But I think having a learning mindset and a growth mindset we talk about a lot around here is how do we make things just a little bit better every day? And, things that go wrong are huge learning opportunities. And I think not grabbing onto those is a huge mistake by a lot of businesses.
When it's Survivor, you also have a good team too. You have to have some version of an alliance. Absolutely. In those cases. You can't lone wolf this thing.
Never.
So during our podcast here, sometimes we have this thing called a bigger picture is what I call it there. And so and this feels like an appropriate time to put this up here.
My gosh, where did you find
in this
that?
Bigger picture, we talk about team and working together. I think the guy on the who's that redheaded kid playing guitar on that side there?
Oh my gosh, you guys really dug into the archives to find that.
This is a band called, I think, Window Pane, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, some would say the greatest heavy metal band of Cincinnati's history, early 2000s. That's amazing.
But I think there's something that's to be said about being in a band and how it correlates to working as a team, regardless of what it is. There is that y'all have to figure a way to work together. Y'all are playing completely different instruments. So when you're talking about an organization, they're all different departments that have to work together to make one sound work right.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how a band atmosphere, maybe some of this early in your career type of life has helped you transition into this?
Yeah, definitely. So this is a blast from the past, but my heavy metal band Window Pane in high school, much to my mother's chagrin, consumed my life in high school and was something I was obsessed with. And we played tons of shows every weekend. And I haven't talked about this in a long time, but it's really interesting because I was the de facto probably leader of the band. If there was a CEO of the band, it certainly would have been me. And it's you're getting a bunch of your friends to be disciplined and, practice and write the songs and come together and then go out in public and play those songs, which can be embarrassing if you're not any good, and do that in front of a set of your peers. So it was a really fun, rewarding experience in high school. And I eventually quit playing sports and I started that's all I did really my entire time there. But I learned a ton of life lessons doing it. I had to fire two of my best friends from the band, which is the most miserable experience ever for a high school kid to do that. But I learned a lot about what it took to work as a team and to work together and to build a mini business, which is really what it was at that time for us. We were just paying for gas money. So, we didn't really, make it big, but it was certainly a fun experience with a lot of lessons learned.
And I think that's really, when you talk about having to fire your friends and having to deal with that. I mean, again, that's not fun, but that is something you have to do as a leader. It's also, part of team building essentially. And I think you and I have the same thought process when it comes to building teams. We have something that's one of our pillars, one of our top 10 initiatives, and it's about engaging, retaining, developing, and recruiting the right people. And I think you guys have some version of that: develop,
Absolutely.
Retain, and attract type of thing.
Absolutely.
And I think it's in that order. I think development has to be very near the top of that order. How has that worked for you in building your teams there?
Yeah, I've always thought you got to retain your people, do your best. You have to develop them. And then if you need to, you can attract people. And I think for us, like one thing that's really served us well is talent density. It's, sort of a phenomenon that other, smarter people than me have put pen to paper on, but we really believe on having like fewer, higher performing people at the company and throughout the organization. And, I know, maybe you're familiar with me or my, the rest of my team, but like throughout our organization, we have amazing directors, amazing managers, and we're constantly figuring out ways to support them, reward them, incentivize them, and make sure they feel like they have a path, sort of at the company as they're going, because I think our success is only as good as their success. I've never been really a like top-down leader. Like I like to paint the vision and then work with the team to figure out from the bottoms up, like how do we build this thing? Because the people that are closest to building the company are at lower levels in your organization, and they need to really buy into what the vision is and want to work on it every day. And, I really view my job to like make sure that they feel comfortable and they have all the tools they need to sort of execute on that every day. But it's a challenge that I think you have to work on every day. You can't forget about it for 1 second or it'll go away. Everything that you've worked for will go away.
I think building a culture also, it obviously starts at the top with where, you have a great reputation from when you were at AGS, and then when you moved over here, and then you brought, I think you brought some incredible talent in with, Casey Whalen and Mike Brennan and Steve Cohan, and even, Pat Hutchins on my team there, who helps our group out. Like those, they're just quality individuals on that side. And I think that's important because it helps trickle that same message that you just said downwards to the rest of the teams that, look, they're humble dudes. They're gonna be there to hopefully take care of you, and they're gonna hopefully help grow you in the organization. And hopefully there are growth patterns in the organization. And I think Absolutely. You and I think the same way is, look, if everyone is super happy and no one ever leaves, that's great. And if someone has to leave to get a better job somewhere else, I'm still happy for them. I'm rooting for my teammates to go somewhere better.
Absolutely. And I think, our job is to help everybody get prepared for the next level. That's good timing on this podcast. Yeah. I hope the next level is available with us, but if it isn't, then we should be helping them find it, and I always talk about, like, I really hope that your best days at Bluberi are your first one and your last one, and if you're leaving us, like, I hope you think about coming back. And we have had people come back since I've been here, even in 4 years plus, where people left and they left on good terms, and they called and said, hey, you know what? A year later, I made a mistake. I want to come back. And like, we're very open to that, conversation, because I think if you build a good place that people want to be, and you support things and you do things the right way, people will be thinking about you, and they're advocates for us when they leave the company too, and I think it's hard. What I always tell people here too is, like, a little company like ours is growing in both upward and outward. And so there will be opportunities in 2029 that you just can't even think about today.
Right.
Like you think, but like, you don't know. There might be a whole other division, a whole other department that didn't exist at the time you started that will be available at that time. And so, that's the picture I'm always trying to paint for everybody, is that the Bluberi from 3 years from now could be very different from the Bluberi of today.
And it's hard for people to sometimes see that bigger picture. If you're a young leader, you're always anxious to go for, hey, what's next? Absolutely. I want to move up now. I want to do this. But understanding, one of the lessons I've always tried to teach, and you're also, I know, on the same page with this too, is how do you tell people that sometimes that promotion isn't necessarily the most important thing, that it's what you're learning and the scope and the skills that you learn outside of that is what will help you grow in the long run. All those extra skills may not get you the promotion today, but it will certainly help benefit you a lot further down, and the pay, the promotions, all that stuff will come exponentially at time. How are you able to teach that to your team?
Yeah, I think I always try to tell everybody, and if you've ever been on the other side of a recruiting pitch for me, I will tell you the same thing. Like, I think it's really about what skills are you going to develop in your next role. Like, if you think about taking a new job, or if you think about your current job, like, again, try to future look a little bit. 3 years from now, what do you want your skill set to be? And how do you think backward from 3 years from now and build that, sort of skill set. And then if you can just focus on being the best at whatever that thing is, somebody will certainly reward you for that. And you may not even need to ask for it. And that doesn't mean don't advocate for yourself. Don't, I believe in advocating for yourself and telling your own story for sure. But I'm telling you that the people that I've seen be the most successful haven't chased titles, they've chased skills. And that's resulted in great things. And I think, I was looking through some of our prep questions, and one was like, what would you tell your younger self? And it's interesting. I think about that. I'm like, I think if I would have told my younger self, my 24-year-old self, hey, you'll be a CEO, in your kind of late 30s, and things are going to go great when you're in your early 40s, they would be like, that's too long from now, is what 24-year-old Andrew would have thought. But I tell you that he would be wrong, because I wouldn't have been ready for it when I was 30. I wouldn't have been ready for it when I was 31 or 32. I needed to learn a lot of things between that time and when I got this job that made me ready for it. And I think getting the big job before you're ready for it, whatever that big job is, can actually be devastating to your career. And I've seen it happen to plenty of people that got the big job, didn't really know what that meant or what it was required, and then flamed out really quickly. And so I think waiting a couple extra years to get the thing you want, you might get it in a more sustainable way that you can be successful, successful at executing. And it's not always easy to hear that when you're younger. You want to go get the next thing, do the big thing. And I certainly appreciate that. Like, I had a tremendous amount of ambition when I was young, and I still do to some extent, and so I think though, the thing that I learned it in my, late 20s when that switch really hit for me, was that I was just going to focus on building my skill set and trying to be the best at whatever the thing was I could do. And that's what's really served me the best, I think.
I think the other thing that served you well too, as well as many leaders, is finding something you're passionate about and being able to go into that space. And that's another thing that I tell young leaders is find what you're passionate about. If you're really good at being in food and beverage, but you hate food and beverage, don't be in food and beverage. Like,
absolutely.
There's nobody wants to go all the way up to a spot and go, well, now what do I do? I hate my job and I'm really good at it. Find that passion to make your world a little bit easier.
Absolutely. I think there's this whole world out there too. I think, and particularly in you're young in your career, you tend to think very insularly, oh, this is everything, but there's not. There's a huge world out there with lots of different things that you can do. And somebody certainly needs the thing that you want to be good at. So, why not match, your passion up with whatever the job is.
And I know how humble you are. And so, and I'm going to advertise Andrew Burke right now, just because I understand the type of human being that you are. And I think it's important that when, our listeners talk about what's good, what's better to be a well-rounded CEO, I have one more picture in my bigger picture scenario here. We're going to pop this up here. is what Andrew Burke does in the community and in philanthropy. You want to give me a little detail about this little bigger picture here?
This was for the St. Baldrick's Foundation. Dan Inkster really just sort of galvanized the troops to get behind it. But sort of all the money we raised went to the children and the Kids Foundation for St. Baldrick's. And I just think in general, giving back to the community is an amazing thing. I'm involved with Goodwill of Southern Nevada here. My wife is on the board of Spread the Word Nevada. It's a behavior that I really want to model for my children. Giving back to the community is really, really important because somebody has to, and I think a lot of us get busy and we're doing our own thing and we're just focused on whatever this thing is. But I'll tell you, some of the best days of my career are these kind of days when you do something fun with your friends and it's for a good cause. And I mean, that's Casey Whalen next to me. I mean, he now has a lion's mane worth of hair.
He does.
And sort of, hey, Matt Wilson from Light and Wonder and Mike McKiskey, and David Lopez in the back. And it's just that's a cool thing to see, the whole industry coming together to do something, for a common good. But I think, the more you give back to your community, the more it gives back to you. And so that's just really an important thing to me and my family too, honestly. It's a part of if we had our own core values, giving back to the community would be a big part of it.
Yeah. And I, with our tribe as well, we're huge in philanthropy. That's something that's near and dear to my heart as well. I was fortunate enough to get to cut Casey's locks that day. That was always fun there. I wanted to take down his lettuce and I was willing to pay a lot of money to do it. But I knew it was going to a good cause because, we are fortunate to be where we're at as a leader in this industry. And I think that, our tribe, that's their core value. When you find places or people who fit your own personal core values, I think that's also a very important aspect of, if you're in a job and you hate it because the people are rude and they're terrible and they don't care about anything else but themselves, maybe you're not in the right place. I think there's some incredible value to it because, like you said, it's about leaving the planet in a better place than you found it. And it certainly speaks so much more to how you can appreciate your days when you know that there are people who care about not just themselves, but you or others.
The idea of legacy is always really important to me. Like I want to think about what my kids are going to think about me when, I'm gone. And that to me is a big deal. And I think that those type of things being involved in the community is what I really hope that they remember me for, if they know that I was my kids know what my job is, but don't 100% understand it. But I don't really care if they understand that. I hope they think I have fun at work and I enjoy it, but that, we do these other things that, sort of help and benefit other people around us.
So I know with young kids, it takes a lot of time and energy with both you and your wife there. I'm not sure how you guys balance all of that, but can you talk about balancing prioritizing family and life and goals and work all together on what your skill level is on it and how you're able to help do those things?
I think it's gotten a lot better over the years. I think when I was younger, I was not very good about that. I was pretty focused on the work thing or the whatever the thing was. But I think I just realized that I'm a better person if all of the parts of my life are working. And I think my personal core value is the things that you focus on and work on get better, and the things that you don't focus on and don't work on get worse. They don't stay the same. And to me, that is my relationship with my wife. That's my kids. That's work. That's my health. I have to spend time on all of those things for them to get better. And if I don't spend that time on all of those things, I truly believe in my heart that those will get worse. My relationship with my family, my, sort of outcomes at work, and my health. And so, I try really hard to think about that every day when I think about my to-do list and try to think okay, what things am I going to do for my family today? What things am I going to do for myself today? What things am I going to do for, Bluberi today? And then I just work really hard to manage my schedule around those things and make sure that I can be at, sort of as many things as I can be and sort of be as present and as focused on them as I can be. I wouldn't say I get that right every day or every week. But I also think huge part of it is having a good partner, which I do, and having lots of great communication too, and making sure everybody's on the same page. And that's just a lot like work too. If not everybody's talking to each other and not everybody's on the same page, you get out of alignment. And I think just having alignment in all the areas of my life make everything a lot easier. When you're not in aligned, whether that's at work or at home, that's when things are tough, right? But if you're aligned, even if the alignment is, hey, these next 3 weeks are going to be tough because the schedule sucks and the kids things suck or whatever the thing is, at least you're aligned and you're going into it knowing what you're going to do, right? If you're out of alignment, that's where things go off the rails. And I think that happens at work, it happens at home. And so, I think as my kind of role as parent, as husband, as, CEO is keep everybody in alignment, but keep us all on the same page,
It's hard. It's not an easy job there because you have so much time. Sometimes sleep loses out on that.
Absolutely.
And again, as young folks coming up there, sometimes it's hard to remember when we were coming up in the business there. Actually, when I was coming to the business, you were still a kid. But when we were coming to the business, it still takes a lot of work to be able to try and balance all that. And sometimes it is multiples of hours and hours and hours. And you have to sacrifice some of these things to make sure that you can do the other side of it too. Balancing that sacrifice I think is important there.
Yeah.
Now, when I talk about Bluberi and their creativity, I always talk about how I don't know how you guys keep coming up with these different things, and whether it's all works together in your offsites that does it, if it's a team strategy approach, but what does help create that inspiration, that creative inspiration for you guys?
We have, I would say, a very cross-collaborative culture. We share probably a mind-blowing amount of information internally. amongst each other and in a pretty wide range. But, we have weekly reports from every department that come out from, sort of the C-level that go to a lot of folks just kind of saying, hey, here's the things we're working on. And I tell you, like, that cross collaboration always inspires some really interesting creativity. And I think too, like, one of the things I would say that is a thing that's a little bit unique to me is that I've always solved in my career for attributes rather than functional skill. I took a person like, we took a person like Steve Cohan, who was in sales and product, and now he's running operations and service. He had not previously run operations or service before, but he's doing an amazing job, and he's unlocking a lot of things in the business that are different, right? Because he's coming at it from a customer-centric approach. He's coming at it from, hey, working with the sales team and how do we interface with them? And it's created a ton of empathy between, sort of the sales and operations and service and our customers, and like unlocked a lot of really interesting thing. Mike Brennan, who's our chief product officer, prior to coming to Bluberi, had, market-facing product management roles and hadn't run the studios, but knew what he wanted to do. And like, he's done just an amazing job of that. And there's like a lot of those examples at Bluberi where, our guy that's the general manager of sort of Drummondville started in QA and then sort of worked his way around. Even my career, like, I felt like being at the investment firm, I got to work on marketing and I got to work on product management and sales and operations. So I just think a lot of really good things happen when sort of everybody else understands what everybody else's jobs are and how they can all sort of work together. And we've had a lot of success with that, of just like really hyper communication and then building a ton of empathy across the sort of organization. And that has really led to a lot of like creative solutions that are cross-functional in nature.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. Staying out of the siloed areas where everyone does, this is my role, and I don't really care what everyone else is doing there. And to have that cross collaboration and to be inquisitive and to ask questions that are not often seen because you're doing the same thing every day. I love that you're moving people around that way, but it's also part of what you talked about at the beginning, like focusing on skills and not on the job, is Absolutely. How you help grow them into whatever's next for them along the way.
I'd say like of every job, there's like 10 to 15% of it that's like functional specific. The rest of it is leadership, communication, organization, and execution, And so you can learn the one part of it, the 10, 15% of it, a lot faster than you can, learn the other 85% of it. And so I think having the other 85% of it is really what makes the difference for a lot of our folks. And in some parts of the business that maybe doesn't apply, like you're a programmer, but like in most executive functions, most sort of director level functions, like it's really about, are you organized? Are you thoughtful? Can you communicate really well? And then are you willing to learn the functional thing you don't know?
And there's all kinds of things getting thrown at you at different times, different spaces. I mean, in your role or many of the leaders' roles, it's always that way. How do you prioritize what gets your attention and what you delete and what you hit approve on?
Yeah. My philosophy on that, I delete everything and then I wait for it to come back. It's, I try to like find the right lane for myself all the time, and it can be challenging when you first become the CEO because your lane is sort of all of them and none of them. And I have to find the right balance of asking questions versus sort of telling that we want to do XYZ things and being very clear when I communicate. But I really feel like my focus and my effort is best served on helping people work through big problems and try to work through like the things they're really stuck on. And so that's sort of where I try to spend my time, is just trying to help keep everybody aligned, keep everybody sort of focused on the things that, they're sort of doing the best at and that they can do uniquely, and really help them that way. And then I try to walk across the organization a lot and just listen. I try to talk to as many employees as I can. Every employee that starts at Bluberi within 90 days of working here, or a little after 90 days, I will spend 10 to 15 minutes with, just to like talk to them. Sometimes that goes an hour, sometimes it's 10 minutes. just trying to hear what they're, thinking about. And like that sometimes unlocks a lot of interesting things for the business. And so just trying to like continuously hear what's going on in the business is the way I, sort of stay focused. But I do create a to-do list every single morning, and I have 4 quadrants in it, and things that don't get done flow over to the next day. It's almost always too ambitious of a list, to get done. But I think I'm fairly good at focusing on the things that matter. Like, can this really change the course of our business 3 to 4 years from now? Or is this just a today problem that probably somebody else is better suited to solve?
Yeah, I'm also a fan of the to-do list, and I sadly also push things to the next day frequently. But knowing what the priority is, I think is super key on that side.
Yeah, I do 4 boxes. I'm sure everybody has their own. It was like adapted from a, Stephen Covey book, but it's not. I don't do what he does anymore. But it's like the first quadrant is has to get done today, or I'm not leaving until it's done today. And then the second quadrant is like I want to keep an eye on it. My third quadrant for me is things I want to read. I'm a pretty voracious reader, so I'm always trying to like do that. And then my fourth one is my personal list. So all the stuff at home, I want to make sure it gets done that day. And so like I do that every morning. I've been doing that for probably 17 years. And I actually have like all of my books from like, as we were moving to this new office, I like found these ones from like 2016 and 17. And I'm like, oh, that's great. It's fun to kind of go back, and even though you just have a few words on it, you can kind of remember what you were doing that time period. So, but it helps you keep.
So, voracious book reader, I'm going to ask you for book recommendations for folks looking to take their career to the next level.
Absolutely. I think Made to Stick by the Heath brothers is one of my favorite books all time, and it's on messaging, and it's like why some messages are sticky and why others aren't. And I think if you really think about your communication and making it sticky, it's more likely to be remembered. They talk about the greatest ad of all time. Probably if you're of a certain age, you remember the Dare, like this is your brain on drugs, with like the egg in the frying pan, and how like that message was like so memorable. And you can like, if you saw that commercial, then you have it like vividly in your head. And then it talks about why some other messages were good messages, but you don't remember what it was about, right? Like it was something interesting and compelling, but like you don't remember what the thing was that they were trying to tell you. And so that's an amazing book. I think The Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz is an all-time favorite of mine. I've read it 2 or 3 times. He talks about how hard being a CEO is and how hard being an executive is. I think a lot of times people write these books and they're like, oh, this was great and everything was easy and this was amazing. And it's not. It's hard and it's excruciating and it's like, sort of mind numbing. And so I think he does an amazing job of sort of encapsulating that. And then I really love Titan by Ron Chernow, which is Rockefeller's sort of biography. And it was just crazy to like go back and hear that story, because you think it's like the equivalent of like somebody saying like, hey, I'm going to desalinate the ocean. And, just crazy idea that you hadn't, I'm going to, sort of mine the moon. Like they're just, idea that was so big at the time and so unique. And just the way that he did that, plus it kind of doubles as like a history lesson, sort of America. So it's pretty cool. I could keep going, but those are the top ones.
I'm a little concerned that Stephen King's the Dark Towers didn't pop on this read list here.
I've got all the Stephen King books for sure. Yeah, that's right.
I understand there may be some ink on you that talks about that speaks to that, but I do think that even speaking of that Stephen King, that series as well, for those who don't know, the Dark Tower series there, I truly believe that part of the backstory is it's about the journey and not the destination. And there's so much that goes with that. And when it comes to people's careers, it should be about the journey, not necessarily the destination. The destination will eventually find your way there. You might have to go through it a few times to get there, but the journey is the most important part. And that's where all the learning happens.
Even him writing that series, which just to nerd out for a second on the Dark Tower series, but like the first book came out before I was born. And he didn't finish the last book until the early 2000s. And so, to take that long to write something, and stay on the same problem for that long is a pretty amazing thing, and I always think about that, just like the willpower it would have taken to like, keep coming back to this story and keep coming back to this thing that you're working on. It's a, talking about taking the long view. It's a pretty cool story about that.
Yeah, it's like 4,600 pages of books to read through that. It's a lot there.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of little quick fire questions I'm going to throw at you here. Talk about your most memorable moment in business first.
Probably, with my last company going public, being at the New York Stock Exchange to ring the bell is a pretty cool day and a pretty cool moment is probably one of them. I would say like my first 60 days at Bluberi are pretty burned in my head, for good and bad reasons.
Yeah.
They were pretty amazing and memorable. And like, it's kind of hard. I've talked to other CEOs about this. It's really hard to like bottle what those first kind of 60 to 90 days are like, because they're kind of terrifying and amazing. And, so many interesting things are happening in your brain as you're kind of going through that, especially for the first time that you're a CEO. So, I mean, that's another one for me that it's like not one day, but it's like, joining Bluberi in those first 60 to 90 days, like I have so many vivid memories of that time that even like other periods are less clear to me, than that time period was.
That's like having a kid to some degree. Like I can screw this whole thing up really quickly,
Right.
or
That's right.
I can figure a way to make this work and create something that's amazing.
And I'm sure what every CEO won't tell you, but I'll just tell you because that's how I am, is that like you take that job as the first time CEO and you have all these insecurities like, am I ready for this? Can I do this? Do they really need me? And for me, like being there, it was like the ultimate validating experience where within like almost like 48 hours, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm going to be okay here. Like they need me. I don't know if, I can help them, but like I'm needed here and we're going to do this. And so it was a pretty like cool moment in my personal development, because I'd been at my last company for a really long time prior to that too. And, you build some routine and habit and that. So it was a really cool, rewarding experience for me.
How about your most just memorable moment outside of business there? I guess you got to discount like Mary and Adrian and the two daughters, because you can't pick one over the other. So I will eliminate those three from it there.
Yeah, for me, it's like Adrian and I went on this European trip. We've been on a couple of them, but like we went on this European trip in like 2010 where we went to like multiple different countries together, and it was just like an amazing fun time to be, sort of young and sort of going around different countries. That's definitely towards the top of the list for me. Is just that sort of, hey, let's explore another country together kind of thing. It was really cool.
Did that trip root you through the Slovenia hospital system?
It did not. There was a different story that brought me through the Slovenian hospital story. That my former boss David Lopez, if you're watching, thank you for saving my life while that was going on. Helped me out of that situation. So,
how about any hobbies? What hobbies do you have there, just for people to know?
Yeah, I'm a voracious reader, as I said, so that's a big one for me. I play a fair amount of video games, which is hard to find time to do, but I definitely love video games and try to find some time to do that. And then I work out, golf, the normal kind of things, but probably reading is like my biggest passion, I would say.
Awesome. I think I love that. I think that just speaks to what a continued learner that you are, and that, look, you're a CEO, but guess what? You still have more to go. You have more to learn along the way.
Every day I can learn something, I feel like.
How about a favorite quote from you?
There's an amazing quote from Peter Drucker, who Peter Drucker is like the ultimate nerd of management science. And he says this thing that most management decisions are between mostly right and probably wrong. And it's always stuck with me, because it's like, anytime you're making a decision in management, like you don't know the right answer and you don't have all the information you need to make the right decision. And so his point was, you got to make a decision and then you got to learn from it and then change course if you made the wrong decision. And I think a lot of times people aren't willing to change course if they made the wrong decision, but I think that's the next follow-up to that. That's really important.
I love that. All right. And then to wrap this up, I just want, one of the things we ask all of our guests is to come and give 3 tips they would provide to anyone who wants to take their career to the next level. What 3 tips would you put out there, Andrew?
So this is a nerdy one and self-serving because I like to read, but I would read the Wall Street Journal every single morning. I've been doing that for years. I think it's a great way to open your brain about what's going on. And by the way, like, I can't tell you the amount of conversations I've had with investors or other people that are reading the similar things or talking about that. So like having, I prefer the Wall Street Journal, but having some sort of business source that you sort of keep yourself up to every day, I think is important. To like taking that long view, like really take the time and sit down and say, where do I want to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and then work your way backwards from that, I think is another really great thing. And then I think, again, like just being focused on skills, like don't freak out so much about titles. Another great quote is comparison is the thief of joy. And I think it's been sort of given to a lot of different people, but if you start comparing yourself to your friend or to your neighbor or to whoever, you always start to feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough. But like I always tell people, I'm like, well, if you're going to compare yourself to somebody, why don't you just compare yourself to Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg? Like, why stop at your neighbor? Why don't you just go right to the top of the wealth food chain and just feel how inadequate you feel against that? I mean, it's really about like comparing yourself against the version of you yesterday, and that to me is the thing I try to focus on. And am I just a little bit better version today than I was yesterday?
Yeah, that's that whole Mamba mentality, is just be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. I truly believe that comparing yourself to who you are the day before, I think is the best comparison you can have, because I mean, again, they're all under, everyone you want to compare yourself is on different circumstances, different places, different types of things. And the one thing that you can always be is true to who you are. And if there's one thing that I know about you, Andrew, I know that you are always true to who you are. And I appreciate that with a partner like you. I've always loved having conversations with you. And I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend an hour with us to talk a little bit about leadership. And thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. I love being on. So thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. We'll hopefully see you here for the next podcast. Stay tuned, folks.
Check out more episodes at thenextlevelcareers.com.